What if most of what you believe is borrowed, not owned by you? Our opinions shape everything from tiny purchases to life-altering loyalties that define who we are. In this video, we will trace how opinions form, harden, and sometimes break before evidence persuades them otherwise. We will borrow tools from philosophy, psychology, and ancient wisdom to explore belief. By the end, you will know when to hold an opinion fiercely and when to let it go without losing yourself. Opinion is an old word that still carries a secret boundary with knowledge. Opinions often feel like knowledge, but they usually lack the robust evidence and justification that knowledge requires. Philosophers call opinions doxa and contrast them against episteme, which means knowledge that is tested. Understanding this distinction helps us treat belief with appropriate intellectual care and emotional detachment. The historical conversation about opinion stretches from Plato's cave to modern skepticism about facts. Plato feared that unexamined opinions would imprison people inside false images and shallow consensus. Later thinkers refined that tension between common sense and rigorous proof. And the debate still informs how we treat everyday beliefs. Recognizing the lineage of that debate gives our choices about opinion more context and weight. Cognitive psychology shows that opinions rarely form in neutral intellectual space alone. Heuristics and biases, like availability or confirmation bias, act as invisible architects that shape our immediate beliefs. These mental shortcuts were adaptive in evolutionary terms, but they distort modern judgment when left unchecked by reflection. Knowing how biases operate gives us practical leverage to detect and correct faulty convictions. Epistemology asks what makes a belief count as knowledge, rather than mere opinion. A traditional formula says knowledge requires truth, belief, and justification working together in a fragile balance. When one of those pillars collapses, what remains is opinion with varying degrees of rational support. The discipline of inquiry is about tightening that balance wherever possible through evidence and argument. Forming opinions wisely means learning rules for when to trust and when to doubt in measured fashion. That process begins with evidence gathering, careful interpretation, and an awareness of counterarguments that weaken confidence. It also demands emotional regulation, because strong feelings often masquerade as clear evidence and pull judgment off course. Habits of intellectual discipline will gradually transform unreliable hunches into resilient, defensible beliefs. Skepticism is not cynicism. It is a disciplined practice of inquiry and provisional assent. Proper skepticism asks how confident you should be given the available evidence, and when to defer judgment until better information arrives. Occasional doubt keeps our beliefs aligned to reality because it prevents premature closure and dogmatism. Cultivating skeptical habits requires patience and a tolerance for uncertainty that many modern environments actively discourage. Emotions are fuel for convictions and can either illuminate or obscure the truth. When fear or pride fuels an opinion, people often double down, even when evidence suggests retreat is appropriate. A mature intellect learns to notice emotional investments and step back before committing absolute certainty. Managing emotions does not mean being emotionless. It means not letting feelings uncritically dictate belief. Social identity anchors many of the opinions we hold almost reflexively in daily life. People inherit beliefs from families, tribes, and online communities that become markers of belonging rather than conclusions of inquiry. Breaking away from these social anchors requires courage because opinions are often social glue with deep consequences. Recognizing that social pressure shapes what you think opens a path to reclaiming intellectual independence. Opinions relate to truth in more than one philosophical way, and those relations matter deeply. The correspondence theory says beliefs aim to mirror an external reality, while coherence theories judge beliefs by internal consistency across a network of ideas. Neither theory alone solves the problem of opinion because evidence and logic all play roles in assessing truth claims. A flexible approach that checks both correspondence and coherence tends to be most useful in practice. Degrees of confidence are essential to thinking clearly about opinions and beliefs. Instead of binary true or false labels, treating belief as probabilistic allows for continual updating as new information arrives. A probabilistic stance reduces the cost of being wrong because it encourages revision rather than defensiveness. Learning to assign degrees of certainty trains the mind to be both decisive and responsive to evidence. There are times to hold opinions strongly because moral clarity or urgent action demands conviction. When fundamental human rights or core ethical standards are at stake, cautious relativism can become a cover for inaction. But strong holding is not the same as rigid dogmatism. It should still be grounded in reasons that can weather critique. Knowing when to stand firm requires ethical reflection and the courage to risk social cost for truth. There are many times to remain open and provisional about opinions because knowledge is often incomplete. In scientific and complex social domains, premature certainty blocks learning and entrenches error with costly consequences. Epistemic humility is the virtue of recognizing how little we sometimes know and being willing to revise accordingly. Practically, that humility preserves relationships and fosters collaborative problem-solving across disagreement. The Stoics offer a compact theory about opinions that remains surprisingly practical today. They distinguished between impressions that appear to the mind and the act of assent, which is the decision to endorse those impressions as true. Stoics taught that we should test impressions before assenting in order to prevent irrational judgments. Applying that simple discipline builds resistance to the quick emotional hooks that generate harmful beliefs. Stoic practice recommended pausing between impression and assent, a small but powerful mental gap. That pause creates a space in which reason can evaluate whether the impression aligns with reliable principles and evidence. Modern cognitive science corroborates the effectiveness of this pause, showing that a brief reflection reduces biased judgments. Making that pause a habit transforms fleeting reactions into durable judgments. Opinions shape experience because perception is not a neutral filter but an interpretive act. Once an opinion takes hold, it organizes attention, memory, and emotion in ways that confirm the original belief. In this sense, opinions create cognitive realities that feel subjectively like truth, even when they diverge from external facts. Understanding this constructive power gives us leverage to reshape experience by changing core assumptions. Narrative identity is the story we tell ourselves that stitches opinions into a coherent self. Convictions provide emotional continuity across time, allowing people to make sense of who they were and who they aim to become. But narratives can also trap us in self-reinforcing loops that deny new evidence and marginalize alternative perspectives. Cultivating narrative flexibility helps maintain integrity while still allowing growth and transformation. Power and persuasion shape which opinions become dominant within societies and which remain marginal. Institutions, media, and charismatic leaders can amplify certain beliefs and marginalize contradictory evidence for strategic reasons. Recognizing these dynamics equips individuals to question not just the content of opinions, but the social forces that produce them. That awareness is an important defense against manipulation and collective error. Technology has accelerated the feedback loops that solidify opinion into echo chambers and tribal certainties. Algorithms reward engagement, not truth, and often promote content that intensifies emotion more than it deepens understanding. Digital environments demand active cultivation of epistemic hygiene if we want to keep beliefs tethered to reality. Practically, that means diversifying information sources and resisting the velocity of outrage as a guide to truth. Practical wisdom for forming beliefs begins with a few simple but transformative habits. First, cultivate curiosity by asking better questions that reveal assumptions instead of merely confirming desires. Second, prioritize evidence over rhetorical force, and always identify the strongest counterarguments to your own view. These practices create a resilient mental architecture that reduces error and fosters deeper understanding. There are concrete tools you can use to upgrade how you form and hold opinions in daily life. Read broadly, engage charitably with opponents, and practice assigning probabilistic confidence instead of unconditional certainty. Adopting simple intellectual tools like Bayesian updating, pre-mortem analysis, and perspective taking will pay long-term dividends. Over time, these tools allow you to be both principled and adaptable in a complex world. Try practical exercises to test and refine your opinions before public commitment or emotional investment. Pause before you post. Ask what evidence would change your mind and test your assumptions against lived experience. Small experiments refine belief like repeated measurements refine a scientific hypothesis. These daily practices reduce the cost of being wrong and increase the chance of converging on more reliable truths. When beliefs are handled wisely, they become instruments of freedom rather than chains of certainty. Thoughtful conviction allows you to act decisively while remaining capable of correction when reality demands it. That balance between resolve and openness is the heart of practical wisdom. The ancient concept that blends ethics and epistemology into a life well lived. It asks not just what you believe, but how those beliefs serve human flourishing. In modern life, the stakes of opinion formation are unusually high because our beliefs shape civic outcomes. Holding opinions responsibly, therefore, becomes a form of civic virtue and moral responsibility in democratic societies. If we cultivate habits that favor truth, we not only improve our private lives, but protect shared institutions and common life. The philosophy of opinion thus has urgent practical consequences for collective futures. The philosophical twist is that opinions are both tools of survival and canvases of identity we constantly repaint. Because beliefs shape perception, they shape action, and because they are revisable, they make growth possible. Holding an opinion wisely means committing to a practice of continual testing, humble confidence, and moral seriousness. This perspective reframes belief from a static trophy to an ongoing discipline that defines the kind of person you become. If this video gave you a new way to think about belief, then the real work begins after watching. Practice the Stoic pause, map your biases, and allow your convictions to be strong without being brittle in the face of evidence. If you found value here, subscribe to continue exploring ideas that matter and share this with someone who will appreciate a gentler, wiser approach to opinion. Thank you for watching, and remember that how you form belief quietly shapes the future you step into.